Hello, my name is Crystal Patil, and I'm a professor in the College of Nursing at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I will be presenting some of the work from our international and interdisciplinary team focused on food safety, entitled I Have Doubts, Perspectives on Food Safety in Peri-Urban Tanzania Among Adults Affected by HIV. Pictured here is our study team and co-authors. Each has contributed to the design and/or data collection or analyses for the DECIDE study. The larger study, Diet, Environment, and Choices of Positive Living, or the DECIDE study, uses longitudinal surveys, geospatial mapping, and qualitative methods to characterize the food environment, identify drivers of food choice, and evaluate dietary adequacy among families affected by HIV. The framework shown here, developed by Turner and colleagues, guided and shaped the development of our questions and our analyses. However, we expand on this framework by connecting the external and personal food environments through family-level factors. The focus of this presentation is on food safety. Food safety is a growing global health concern, and the reason for this is that foodborne illnesses have a large impact on death and disability. At present, Sub-Saharan Africa carries the largest per capita burden of foodborne diseases. The Sub-Saharan African region also carries a disproportionate burden of HIV, as 70% of people living with HIV are living in this region. Because people living with HIV are especially susceptible to infection, our focus was on perceptions of food safety among families affected by HIV. These data come from qualitative interviews that were completed between July of 2019 and March of 2020. The interviews were conducted in Swahili, transcribed and translated. For this presentation, we focus on the responses of the 60% of participants who discussed various aspects of food safety with us. The majority of participants did offer some ideas about food safety. However, 40% did not think food safety was much of an issue. For example, one 39-year-old caregiver of a person with HIV said, "I never have doubts. I'm truly not worried. I see everything is safe." When people talked about food safety, we found that comments about food safety were often linked to the media and experience, or their own observation, or some combination of all of these. Social media and rumors were mentioned as sources of food safety information. Pictured here is an article that circulated focusing on what was termed plastic rice. This rumor posited that there was resin and starch added to the rice that was for sale at the markets. Although this rumor was never substantiated, 2 years later, several of our participants mentioned worrying about plastic rice. When asked about what she was concerned about with regard to food safety, a 28-year-old female who cares for a person with HIV said, "Absolutely, I have feelings. I worry about this mango juice because there are some rumors. I bought the juice and then someone told me that those juices have maggots. This has remained in my mind. I'm really scared about this. They say the juices stay on the shelf for a long time and eventually they get maggots. Even if you look at the expiration date, it doesn't help. I investigated to see if I would find maggots. I didn't. I found thread-like membranes instead. To date, I don't drink it." This picture comes from a newspaper article that was published in 2015, in which it reported on the risk associated with fresh squeezed juices and noting that vendors may not institute proper sanitation practices. From our study, several people talked about juices as a problem source. For example, one person living with HIV said that they avoided purchasing juices because, she said, "I worry about food preparation. For example, I can't drink the juice that is sold in the streets because I know to a greater extent that most people who make juice do not make it in a hygienic environment." One study about unregulated food juice vendors in Dar es Salaam showed that E. coli was detectable in 80% of the samples. This may explain why locally prepared juices were a concern for many of our participants. Not all of the media referred to was negative. One male participant said that he listened to a radio excerpt about food safety in restaurants, and he explained that he learned about food handling in the restaurants and the importance of hand washing. He said that he heard that the preparers would go to the restroom and not wash their hands with soap and then would return and touch the food. He linked this exposure to bacteria. One of the important drivers of food choice was perception of food safety as it related to the properties surrounding a vendor. Several expressed loyalty to particular vendors or knowing the vendors, vendor familiarity. One woman said, there's a certain female vegetable vendor who has been selling for several years. You can see that the vegetables are good. We know her house. They have a garden there. I buy vegetables from 2 women only. I don't just buy vegetables from any vendor. No. Customer loyalty based on experience and also visuals was important. These visuals send messages to potential customers. For example, some were very selective about the butchers. The visual cues from the storefront were interpreted based on cleanliness. A participant said, there is a window so you can see the meat while you are outside the butcher shop. They wear white coats with no bloodstains and they use modern equipment to cut the meat. Pictured here is another vendor who's sending a message of professionality by wearing a white apron. You notice that the foods are also individually wrapped in plastic. These 2 visuals are telling customers that perhaps this food was prepared under good hygiene conditions. And these were common food safety perceptions. In asking about food safety, some people focused on specific foods. We've already heard about the juices, but another type of food that was concerning was what's called the improved chickens. Worries centered on how improved chickens are raised, including their rapid growth rates, the use of antibiotics, and the conditions in which the coops in which they are raised. When folks worried about vegetables, they were often concerned about the agricultural chemicals or pesticides that were used. For example, the residues on leafy greens and tubers were mentioned as particularly worrisome. Others talked about being concerned with the production conditions. For example, where are the plants growing and what are they exposed to? Many mentioned that they could be grown near raw sewage and exposed to fecal material. One man said, I have doubts about vegetables because I see how they are cultivated. When asked about strategies to avoid foodborne illness, responses fell into a couple of categories. First was that many people talked about not eating foods that were cooked outside of their home. The strategy was that they simply avoided eating foods they did not cook. One person said, I don't trust ready-made juice because I haven't seen how they make it. It is better that I just eat fruits. Others described what they could do at home, which included the washing of raw fruits and vegetables to remove chemical residues or exposures. And reliance on familiarity and experience with a vendor, as well as perceptions of cleanliness, were important drivers of food purchasing decisions. In the context of little regulation and few objective indicators, participants relied on pieces of information to make food purchasing and eating decisions. They are concerned about agricultural chemicals, production conditions, and human contamination. Observations about hygiene and growing conditions were important, and perceptions of cleanliness were also mentioned. And vendors were clearly aware of this and employed practices to imply cleanliness, such as aprons, the wrapping of their foods, as well as the displays. Methodologically, however, this work did not reach saturation on the topic of food safety. It does highlight the need for additional research to expand on this work. For example, we would like to assess the role of social media in the sharing of both accurate and inaccurate information. And given that men and women don't have equal access to social media, we'd like to look at this from a gendered perspective. And last, a lot of this information can help build and inform the development of tools to capture perceptions of food safety at multiple levels. Thank you for listening to this presentation. And here I'd like to acknowledge that we are grateful to the participants who gave us their time and shared their stories. and the funder of this work, as well as all the collaborators on our team and my institution.